The black Korean heritage mafia boss told the black waitress she was useless. Then she disarmed 5 ASSASSINS using only a napkin. Chapter 1. The wrong table 2 UNDRSTMATINT. Obsidian, high-end restaurant, Seoul, 9:47 p.m. Obsidian earned its name honestly. Black marble floors, black lacquered walls, lighting so precise and so deliberately low that every table existed in its own private universe, separated from the next by carefully engineered shadow. It was the kind of restaurant where the menu had no prices, where reservations required a reference, and where the sommelier knew not just your wine preference but your net worth. Kim Jung, 43, sat at table 1, the corner booth that was not listed on the reservation system because it existed for exactly one person, with his jacket buttoned and his back to the wall. He had not chosen this table for the view. He had chosen it because from this position he could see every entrance, every exit, and the hands of every person in the room before they could see his face. He was, by most visible measures, a legitimate businessman. Technology investment. Real estate. The kind of wealth that had been laundered through enough legitimate channels that it sparkled in the light. He was also the founding chairman of the Iron Gate Consortium, which was the polished name for something that had started in a Busan shipping container 20 years ago and had grown, through methods that did not survive public scrutiny, into an organization that controlled more of Seoul's underground economy than the police had yet been willing to formally acknowledge. He was reviewing acquisition documents when she arrived at the table. Wanita Osei, 31, placed the water glass down at the upper right of the setting correct position, without being told, and produced a small leather notepad. Jung did not look up. Tasting menu, he said. Of course. She didn't move. Though the halibut in the second course was brought in this morning from a supplier that's been substituting Pacific for Atlantic for the last 3 weeks, chef hasn't noticed. You might prefer the seasonal alternative. He looked up. She was looking at him with the attentive neutrality of a career hospitality professional. Dark uniform, hair pulled back, notepad at the ready. She had been on the floor for 3 weeks. He had seen her peripherally, the way he registered all staff, categorized and filed. Do you know that? He said. I sign for deliveries on Tuesday mornings. A pause. The weight variance is consistent with Pacific stock. Smaller fish, less density. He studied her for 2 seconds. Fine, the alternative. She noted it and left. He watched her move across the floor, not deliberately. It was automatic, the same assessment he applied to everyone in any room. She moved with an economy of motion that did not belong in a restaurant. No wasted steps. Her route from his table to the service corridor was the most direct possible line that also happened to pass the 4 other occupied tables and the 2 emergency exits. He filed it, said nothing. Returned to his documents at 10:22 p.m., the 5 men came in through the main entrance. They were dressed correctly, suits, pocket squares, the surface architecture of legitimate diners. Jung clocked them at the door. He clocked the slight break in their gait that came from shoulder holsters under well-fitted jackets. He clocked the way they spread immediately upon entering, 2 to the left, 2 to the right, 1 center, a trained fan pattern covering all vectors. His own security was at the exterior. He had 2 men at the table, Park and Son, who had registered the new arrivals and were already shifting posture. The center man looked directly at table 1, *dragon's claw, *the tattoo was at the collar, just visible. Jung had been expecting them. He had not expected them to be this fast, or this many, or for his security to be this exposed. He reached for his phone. Park was already moving. Then several things happened in a very compressed window of time. First, Wanita appeared from the service corridor with a wine carafe and 3 folded napkins over her left arm, normal service presentation, perfectly timed to put her between the approaching center man and Jung's table. The second, the center man's hand moved to his jacket. The third, Wanita's wine carafe intersected with the man's wrist at an angle that was not accidental, redirecting the draw and sending the weapon skating across the black marble floor as her elbow found his solar plexus. She moved through him as if he were a revolving door, using his staggering body as a momentary shield while her hand found his partner's gun arm, and the folded napkins in her left hand became Somehow, a weapon, one flick, tight roll, and the third man's trigger finger was locked backward at a joint angle that produced a strangled sound and immediate incapacitation. Park had the fourth. Sun had the fifth. It was over in under 40 seconds. The room was silent except for the ambient jazz that the sound system continued to play with indifferent elegance. Wanita stood over the three men she had engaged. She was not breathing hard. The wine carafe was still in her hand, not a drop spilled. She set it carefully on the nearest table, smoothed her uniform jacket and turned to face Jung, who was standing now, documents forgot, looking at her with an expression that was entirely new on his face, genuine surprise. "I told you the halibut was the wrong choice," she said, Chapter 2, running toward the wrong WMNEXT. Seoul STRETS/INT. KOR8YOWN dive bar. Later that night they separated in the chaos of police arrival and staff evacuation. Jung had protocols for this. His legal team was on retainer for exactly these situations. His security had managed the scene narrative by the time the first patrol car arrived. He was out of the building in 11 minutes. Wanita was gone in 4. He found this out at 11 p.m., sitting in the back of his car with Assistant Director KWONMINJI, his most trusted operational coordinator, on speakerphone. She clocked out before the police arrived. Gave a statement to the manager that was completely clean, saw nothing, was in the back, corroborates the official line. Her HR file is, a pause, keyboard sounds interesting. Define interesting. It's perfect. 3 years in hospitality, impeccable references, no gaps, no inconsistencies. Another pause, which is why it's interesting. Real lives have inconsistencies. This file reads like it was constructed. Jung looked out the rain-blurred window. Find her. She's already gone from her registered address, but I have a partial on her transit card. She used it 20 minutes ago at a stop near. Send it. HANJI bar, KOR8TOWN, 11:41 p.m. ***. The Hanji bar had no design concept. It had a counter, 6 stools, a wall of mid-tier spirits, and lighting that suggested the owner had decided once, years ago, that this was bright enough and had never revisited the question. Wanita was on the second stool from the end with a glass of something amber and her eyes on the door. She clocked Jung when he was still on the pavement outside. She watched him come in. He was still in the dinner jacket, now slightly less pristine, tie loosened, the very specific dishevelment of a controlled man having an uncontrolled night, and she turned back to her drink before he reached her. He sat on the stool beside her without asking. The bartender looked at him. He ordered soju without looking at the menu. They sat for a moment in silence that had a lot of content. "Not going to ask me to leave," she said. "No. You're also not going to threaten me." "I haven't decided yet." She glanced sideways at him. He was looking straight ahead at the shelf of bottles, and there was something in his expression that was not what she had expected from the man who ran table one like a throne. He looked under the control, tired, not physically, the deeper kind. "Your name," he said, "Wanita, the rest. Later." She turned her glass in her hands. "How's your security team?" Embarrassed. "They shouldn't be." The fan pattern those men used was designed to neutralize trained security by targeting the principal directly. Your men read it correctly and moved correctly. They just moved slightly behind the threat curve. She paused. "I was already inside it." Jung turned to look at her directly for the first time since sitting down. She let him look. "Who are you?" he said. "Someone who made different choices than you and ended up in roughly the same place." She finished her drink. "You tracked me here, which means you have resources and you're not going to stop. So," she set the glass down, "I know a place we can talk without the next team finding us. You have maybe an hour before they figure out the transit card was a deliberate trail. A beat. You led me here," he said. "I wanted to see what you'd do when you arrived." She stood. Straightened her jacket. "You sat down and ordered soju. Acceptable." She looked at him. "You coming?" He considered for approximately 2 seconds. He came. Chapter 3, 2 broken things in a ROOMINT. Safe House, MAPO District 1, 15 a.m. The Safe House was a second-floor apartment above a dry cleaning business that smelled perpetually of solvent and warm fabric. It had a wooden table, 2 chairs, a window with a view of the alley, and a small kitchen that had been stocked with functional rather than pleasant priorities. Wanita put a kettle on. Jung sat at the table and looked at the room with the practiced eye of a man assessing a space for threat architecture. One entrance, one window, clean sightlines, no interior doors behind which surprises could wait. Whoever had set this up knew what they were doing. "Used this before," he said. "Twice." She set 2 cups on the table and sat across from him. The overhead light was warm and low, and in it she looked different than she had in the restaurant, not softer exactly, but more present. The professional surface was still there, but something underneath it was closer to the skin. "Program 7, she said. He waited. Black Budget Government Initiative. 12 operatives recruited from various intelligence and military backgrounds for deep cover placement in high-value civilian environments. Hotels, restaurants, private clubs, anywhere that high-profile targets might be vulnerable." She wrapped both hands around the cup. "I was asset number 4. I ran embedded cover for 6 years, past tense. The program was dissolved 18 months ago. Budget cuts officially. The real reason was that 2 of our operatives were burned and 1 was killed, and the committee decided the exposure risk outweighed the intelligence value." Her jaw tightened slightly. "We were given clean paperwork, a modest settlement, and told to be civilian." She looked at him. "I've been trying to figure out what that means." Jung was quiet. "Restaurant," she said. "I took the job 6 weeks ago because I had a partial intelligence thread suggesting the Dragon's Claw had flagged an Iron Gate target in Seoul's hospitality district. I didn't know it was you specifically. I was looking for the pattern." A pause. "Once I identified the target, protocol would have been to report up and step back. There's no one to report to anymore." She held his gaze. "So I stayed." Kettle reached a low whistle. Neither of them moved. "Your empire," she said. "The Busan origin, the shipping containers, how much of it was yours and how much of it was survival?" The question landed differently than he expected. Not like an interrogation, like genuine inquiry. "Survival first," he said after a moment. "Then it became something I was good at. Then it became the only version of me I knew how to be." He looked at the cup in front of him. "My brother died in Busan, debt, the kind that compounds." His voice was measured. "I decided no one in my reach would ever die that way again. That decision has a cost. I've been paying it for 20 years. Wanita was looking at him with attention that was neither pitying nor detached. She was simply listening. "Napkin," he said, shifting ground. She almost smiled. "Rolled tight enough, it immobilizes a trigger finger at the second joint. Basic mechanics. Most people don't think about napkins as anything other than napkins. People haven't spent 6 years learning how to turn a restaurant into a tactical environment." She met his eyes. "Every table has leverage. A carafe is a weight and a reach extension. A napkin is a restraint or a strike assist. A wine list is a hard edge." She paused. "I see every room that way. I can't turn it off." "Neither can I," he said. "Just different geometry." They sat for a moment with that between them, the specific recognition of 2 people who had been built by their respective crucibles into something that couldn't be fully contained in an ordinary room. "Someone fed them your location," Wanita said. "The timing was too precise. That wasn't opportunistic surveillance. That was a confirmed, scheduled hit." She held his gaze. "Someone very close to you told them when and where." Jung's face went still. "I know," he said. Chapter 4. The man behind the CURTANINT. Iron Gate Operations Center, 3 a.m. The Operations Center occupied a floor of a legitimate office building in Gangnam that was registered to a property management company. The lights were blue-white and relentless. 4 analysts were already at their stations when Jung and Wanita arrived, called in by Kwon Minji, who met them at the elevator with a tablet and the expression of someone who had been dreading confirming a suspicion. "Jin Woo," she said, before Jung could ask. Jin Woo, 55, had been with the Iron Gate Consortium for 16 years. He had been Jung's advisor, strategist, and the closest thing to a mentor that a man like Jung allowed himself. He had attended Jung's mother's funeral. He had been the first call Jung made when the Tokyo expansion hit regulatory trouble. He was, in the architecture of Jung's world, load-bearing. "Much," Jung said. His voice was completely flat. 18 months of contact with Dragon's Claw intermediaries. Financial transfers through 4 shell layers. We only found it because Wanita's description of the hit pattern matched a specific tactical template the Claw has used in 3 previous operations. Minji glanced at Wanita, reassessing her in real time. That template has only been available to organizations with a very specific intelligence feed. The feed source maps back to a device registered to Jin Woo's secondary office. The room was very quiet. He told them about my brother, Jung said. Not a question. There are communications suggesting he leveraged personal background information to establish credibility with the Claw leadership. Minji paused. Jung, he's been positioning himself as the successor structure. The plan appears to be that with you removed, he takes Iron Gate's infrastructure to the Claw as a, she searched for the right word, merger. Jung stood at the center of the blue-lit room and looked at 16 years of trust being forensically dismantled on 4 screens simultaneously. Wanita stood to his right. She was going through the Claw's tactical files with a speed and comprehension that was making Minji visibly recalibrate. He'll know the restaurant operation failed by now, Wanita said without looking up, which means he's already activating a contingency. The question is whether the contingency is an exit or a second attempt. She looked up. Does he have a location where he'd feel untouchable, somewhere with defensible architecture and existing relationships with the Claw? Minji pulled up a location file. He owns a warehouse property in Yanchon, bought 3 years ago through a subsidiary. We flagged it at the time as a curiosity. That's where he'll go. Wanita looked at Jung. And he'll bring you there if he can because the Claw needs a visible confirmation to satisfy the contract. A death in a warehouse is cleaner than a failed restaurant hit. He'll send bait, Jung said. He'll send someone you can't refuse. Wanita's voice was careful. Who can't you refuse? Jung's eyes moved to Minji. Minji's phone buzzed. She looked at it. Her face went pale. My sister just called, she said. She says a man came to her apartment. He wants me to pass Jung a message. She looked up. He says he just wants to talk. He says to come alone. She swallowed. He says he has something that belongs to Jung's family. The room went colder. His brother's watch, Jung said quietly. Jinwoo has my brother's watch. I gave it to him to hold when he stopped. He knew I'd come, Wanita said. She looked at him directly. Don't. I have to. I know. She held his gaze. So we go prepared. Chapter 5. The Warehouse and the Woman Who ARRIVED FIRSTNT YANGCHON Warehouse. 11 p.m. the following night Wanita arrived at the warehouse 4 hours before Jung. She came in through the drainage access on the south wall, a route she had identified from the building schematics, and confirmed with a reconnaissance pass at 3 p.m. dressed as a utilities worker. She had spent the intervening hours mapping the interior from the outside. Guard positions, shift patterns, the specific blind spots that every security setup had because humans defaulted to protecting the center and underfunding the periphery. She counted 11 Claw operatives. Jin Woo's personal security added 4 more. The interior was configured for a single, central confrontation. A chair at the center of the main floor, lights rigged above it, everything designed to place Jung in a spotlight and deny him any tactical angle. They had planned for a covert operative. They had planned for Jung's security team. They had not specifically planned for the woman who had once spent 3 months embedded in a Macau casino, neutralizing a gambling syndicate from the inside out. By the time Jung arrived at 11 p.m., alone as instructed, because he had told Wanita he was coming alone and she had said I know, that's fine in a way that did not mean what it appeared to mean. Wanita had been inside the warehouse for 4 hours. She had been busy. Jung walked in through the main entrance with his hands visible and his face closed. The Claw operatives closed behind him immediately. He was walked to the center chair by 2 men who did not need to be rough because the architecture of the room did the threatening for them. Jin Woo stood in the shadows at the room's edge. He was wearing a charcoal suit and he looked, Jung thought, like a man who had made a decision he had been approaching for a long time and was now inhabiting it with the resigned completeness of someone who had burned the return route. I want you to understand, Jin Woo said, stepping forward, that this was never personal. My brother's watch, Jung said. Jin Woo reached into his jacket and produced it, set it on a table beside him. You can have it back. I know, Jung said. This doesn't have to be. The lights went out. What followed was efficient, dark, and surgical. Wanita had disabled the backup generator relay at 10:47 p.m., which she had timed to Jung's entrance. In the dark, which she had memorized and they had not, the balance of the room inverted entirely. The first operative went down at the east position. The second and third, who moved toward each other, the natural human response in sudden darkness, went down together. Wanita moved through the room the way she had walked through obsidian on the night of the hit, unhurried, precise, using the geometry she had spent 4 hours building in her memory. She was not there to kill. She was there to clear a path and extract one man. When the emergency lighting, a separate system, lower and amber, kicked in at the 2-minute mark, 8 of Jin Woo's 15 men were down. The remaining 7 had clustered defensively, which was exactly wrong. They had made themselves a perimeter that protected the center but left the edges undefended. Wanita appeared beside Jung. She handed him his brother's watch without looking at him, having retrieved it from the table 17 seconds earlier. He looked at it in his hand, then at her. I told you I was coming alone, he said. You did come alone. She assessed the remaining 7 men with calm efficiency. I was already here. Jin Woo was at the far wall. He was looking at both of them with the expression of a man recalculating in real time and arriving at numbers he didn't like. This isn't finished, he said. Jin. Jung's voice was the quietest it had been all night. I built everything I had from nothing because I refused to let the people I loved be destroyed by other people's decisions. He looked at the man who had been, for 16 years, the closest thing he had to a trusted equal. You knew that. You knew everything, and you chose this. Jin Woo looked at him for a long moment. Money was too much, he said, an echo, a different man than Shin Tae-won from a different story arriving at the same hollow place. It always is, Jung said. The police called by Minji 40 minutes ago, time to arrive after the internal resolution, announced themselves at the exterior. Wanita had already identified the exit route. Now, she said. They went Chapter 6, what the FBI found and what they didn't INT. Federal Coordination Office, Seoul, 3 days LATRSPCI. Agent Rachel Monroe, American, Korean-American mother, posted to Seoul on joint jurisdiction tasking, sat across from Wanita in an interview room that was designed to be neutral and achieved merely beige. Monroe put a file on the table. Program 7. Wanita looked at it, said nothing. Record is classified above my clearance, which is already significant. Monroe folded her hands. What I can see is that you were operational for 6 years in deep cover, and that your last 3 assignments involved organizations that subsequently experienced significant structural disruption. She paused. In one case, the structural disruption was the arrest of a sitting government minister. I read about that, Wanita said. Monroe almost smiled. The Dragon's Claw operation. Jin Woo, your involvement. I was a witness. You were present at a site where 11 trained operatives were incapacitated and the organizational leadership of the Seoul cell was delivered extremely conveniently to Korean law enforcement. Monroe looked at her. You used a napkin at Obsidian. I spilled wine. It was a reflex. Ms. Osei. Wanita looked at her. I'm not here to charge you, Monroe said. Program 7 operatives acting in a protective capacity on U.S. Allied soil are covered under a joint framework that your program administrators buried very deeply but did not actually dissolve. She slid a document across. This is a formal recognition of your actions as falling within that framework. It doesn't give you anything officially, but it means no one will be looking at you for what happened at the warehouse. Wanita looked at the document. And Jung, Iron Gate's financial architecture is being reviewed. There are things that will be restructured. There are things that will probably be overlooked because the claw operation provided intelligence that closes 4 cases we've been building for 2 years. Monroe paused. He's not going to prison. He is going to have a very significant conversation with a very senior legal team. I see. After that conversation, he'll be free to make any personal decisions he wants. Monroe picked up her file, including ones about what he does with the next chapter of his life. Chapter 7. The space between SDAYING and LEAVINGINT. Jung's penthouse, Seoul, 1 week later she came to say goodbye at 7 p.m. on a Tuesday. Jung opened the door and looked at the bag on her shoulder, which was small and practical and told a complete story. "Come in," he said. She came in. The penthouse had a view of Seoul that cost more per square foot than most cities charged per acre. She had been here once before, briefly, and she looked at the city below now with the same assessment she gave every high vantage point: entry angles, sight lines, proximity to transit. "You can't turn it off either," he said. He was watching her. No. He poured tea without asking. He had learned in the past weeks that she preferred tea to everything else and that she took it plain. He set it on the low table and sat. She sat across from him. "The penthouse was very quiet. Monroe briefed me," he said. "I assumed she would. She told me the Program 7 framework protects you." He held her gaze. "She also told me you turned down a reactivation offer." "I did." Why? Wanita looked at the city. "I spent 6 years being useful to other people's objectives. Good objectives mostly, important work, but I was always a piece in someone else's structure." She paused. "I want to know what it feels like to build something of my own." Jung was quiet. "Empire," she said. "Iron Gate. You told me in the safe house that you built it from survival and it became the only version of you that you knew." She looked at him. "That was honest, and I think you're standing at the edge of a decision about whether you're going to keep being that version. The legal review will find what it finds. I'm not talking about what they tell you have to do." She met his eyes. "I'm asking what you want to do." He looked at her for a long moment. "I spent 20 years building walls," he said slowly. "Different materials than yours, same function." He looked at the city below, his city by most practical definitions. "I'm tired of the weight of them." Juanita's hands were around the teacup. "Where would you go?" she asked. "If you could go anywhere." He almost didn't answer. It was the kind of question that had too much in it. "My grandmother had a small holding in the countryside," he said. "She grew things. I used to think it was the most boring work imaginable." A pause. "I think about it more now." Wanita looked at him. "I have a friend in Sonoma Valley. She has a vineyard she's been trying to find a business partner for, someone with capital and operational experience." She paused. "Someone who understands structure and growth and long-time horizons." The room was very still. "That's very specific," he said. "Been thinking about it for a few days." Vineyard. Grapevines take 3 to 5 years before they produce. You plan meticulously. You wait. You watch for threats: frost, disease, drought. You build something that gets better the longer it's left alone." She held his gaze. "It sounded like something 2 particular people might be good at." Jung looked at her for a long time. "You came to say goodbye." He said, "I came to see if goodbye was actually the right word." She stood. "Take the time you need. Deal with what needs to be dealt with." She set down the cup. "I'll be in Sonoma in 3 months. Whether or not you come." As she picked up her bag, "I'm building something real." She left. He stood at the window for a long time, looking at the city he had built and the weight it carried, and turned over in his hands his brother's watch, which kept perfect time. Chapter 8. What grows in Sonoma *****. Oseikim Vineyard, Sonoma Valley. 4 months later, dawn *****. The vines were 3 years old and had not yet produced. This was fine. This was the plan. Wanita walked the rows at 6 a.m. because old habits did not dissolve. They redirected. She still woke before the world and she still assessed the space around her with precision. Only now the space was 40 acres of hillside and the threats were aphids and late frost, and whether the irrigation calibration was right. She was kneeling at a vine's base, checking the soil moisture with 2 fingers, when she heard the rental car on the gravel road. She didn't turn around immediately. She heard the door. She heard footsteps on the gravel, then on the earth between the rows. She heard him stop 6 feet behind her. She turned. Kim Jung stood in the early Sonoma light in clothes that were the least formal she had ever seen him wear: dark jeans, a jacket that had not been chosen for a boardroom. He had a small bag. He had the look of a man who had done something difficult and arrived somewhere he had not been sure he was coming to until he was already on the plane. "Late," she said. "I said 3 months. I had some structural reorganization to complete." He looked at the vines. "How are they?" "Healthy, stubborn." She stood, brushed the earth from her hands. "No fruit yet. 3 to 5 years, you said." He looked at the rows, the careful spacing, the tied canes, the long, patient geometry of something being built for a future that was not yet visible. He looked at the valley below, gold in the early light, unhurried. "I dissolved Iron Gate's operational divisions," he said. "Legitimate business holdings are being maintained under new management. I provided full cooperation with the Joint Task Force on the Dragon's Claw investigation. Jin Woo will be prosecuted." He paused. "I kept my grandmother's countryside property and a reasonable amount of capital. The rest, donated. Several organizations, including two that work specifically with families in debt crisis." A pause. "For my brother," Wanita was looking at him. "I'm not soft," he said, "and neither are you. This," he gestured at the vines, "isn't a fantasy. It's going to be hard work and slow returns, and there will be days when it's deeply unglamorous." "I know," she said. "I've been doing it for 4 months. Also not easy as a person, I'm aware. Neither am I." She looked at him steadily. "We are, both of us, people who see every room as a problem to be solved and every relationship as a variable to be assessed." She tilted her head. "But we are also, both of us, tired of doing that alone." He was quiet. "There's a tool shed that needs organizing," she said. "The irrigation controller in the east section needs recalibration, which requires someone to hold the manual override while I adjust the pressure valve, so it's genuinely a 2-person job." She looked at him. "And there is coffee." He looked at the vines for one more moment. "Show me the irrigation controller," he said. She turned and walked between the rows. He fell into step beside her, half a pace back, old instinct rearguard position. And then deliberately, even with her. Two people who had spent their entire lives building walls, walking between things that grew slowly and took years to bear fruit and would, if tended correctly, outlast everything that had tried to destroy them. The sun came up over Sonoma Valley. The vines were patient. So were they. *End*. Next, please subscribe.